Welcome to Mac and Bleu, where we introduce you to who is building Arizona, bringing you the people and businesses that shape the landscape around us. From economic development and developers, underwriters and lenders, architects and engineers, to the very builders and suppliers that bring it all together. Now let's join our hosts, Robert Johnson and JJ Levensky, aka Mac and Bleu.
Welcome to Mac and Bleu. I'm Robert Johnson, Vice President of Torrey Contracting, Vice President of Business Development. I guess it's basically the same thing.
He gave himself a promotion again.
Right. He's JJ Levensky, the President of Blue Wave General Contracting. How are you this morning?
I'm great.
Man, it's great. I don't know if anybody else notices, but we're in new digs, and it's exciting. What do you think so far?
Yeah.
I mean,
new studio.
I love the. We even have the guest's
Wow.
name.
Did we spell his name right though?
We did. We got it all right.
Very nice.
So yeah, good. Good weekend.
Yeah, you.
Yeah. It's always too short, but we had a good weekend. We have with us today, and we're very glad of the fact.
Thank you.
Regardless of whether we dressed up or not for you, but Marshall Macfarlane.
That's it.
Who is the operations manager of C3 Engineering. Thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm happy for the invitation. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Tell us a little about yourself and C3 and what you do there.
Well, where do you want me to start? Way back or immediate or?
Hey, we've got 60 minutes. As long as you can fit it in, we're good.
Well, I'm an introvert and I'm not much of a talker, so you guys are gonna have to drag stuff out of me. So
we can tell.
All right, yeah. I was born and raised in Eastern Canada. Spent 6 years or so in Northern Maine, and been in Arizona just over 25 years. I'm a millwright.
So moose is part of your diet then, is what
Moose is part of my diet. Funny story, I went home around 4 years ago. It had been the first time I'd been home for 18 years. And my first dinner home was moose meat and fiddleheads. A fiddlehead is like a fern that they grow there. So.
Yeah, I was going to go. I've never heard of fiddlehead. Have you ever heard of fiddlehead?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, come on. Well, you're from up that way.
No, well, I was, when you're from Minnesota, Wisconsin, you're part of Canada.
Yeah, it's the right latitude or whatever. Yeah, so it was moose meat and fiddleheads. First time I've been home in 18 years. So.
Wow.
So you've been here how long? 25 years?
Closer to 26 now. Okay. Yeah. So
Who's counting though, right?
I'm a native now, practically. I love it here. You couldn't pay me to go back to the cold. So, but yeah, I'm a millwright by trade. Went to trade school in Canada, and then industrial mechanic in some factories. Spent a good portion of my career in manufacturing. Spent 13 years in the Canadian Army in their version of the National Guard. They call it the militia there. I don't call it the militia here because people think
they tend to get a different.
There's a different connotation to it, but did that and eventually in manufacturing became a maintenance supervisor and then a safety director and then a facilities manager. Spent a good number of years in facilities management. Took a slight detour around 15 years ago into electrical engineering and enjoyed it, but went back into facilities management. Worked for the University of Arizona in downtown Phoenix for just over 10 years at the biomedical campus as a facilities director down there. Worked for the town of Gilbert for almost 4 years as their facilities manager, and then got lured back to electrical engineering. So I've been there since the middle of August at C3 Engineering as their operations manager. So that's the Reader's Digest version of where I am now. So.
What does C3 do?
So in a nutshell, we make things safe electrically for facilities managers, plant managers, and that kind of thing. So it's kind of a multi-pronged approach. We do what we call conformity. So everyone's familiar with UL listings. Mm-hmm. There's UL labels on everything, including consumer things. Well, the same things apply to factory equipment and that kind of stuff. And it's pretty common that equipment that comes in from other countries, whether it's Taiwan or Germany or Poland or Czechoslovakia or Korea, doesn't have the appropriate listing. So we're a lab that's able to put that listing on it. So there's a process we go through, and we can apply a label. UL is not the only company that can put that label on, so it's the UL equivalent. there's probably around a dozen, maybe 20 companies in the world that can apply those labels. So we're one of those. The other thing we do is compliance. So we help folks navigate, whether it's National Electrical Code or NFPA 70. People are starting to be more and more familiar with arc flash. So we can do arc flash studies, make sure your labeling is correct. We can do other power system studies like short circuit coordination studies. It's kind of a niche market. Then we do acceptance and maintenance testing. From the facilities management world, I'm a big proponent of preventive maintenance, and a lot of people have good PM programs but don't do it with their electrical gear. And in today's day and age, if your electricity goes out, everything goes out. So
Right.
There's actually recommended PM plans for your electrical gear, and everything from your utility feed on in to your breaker panels, whether it's testing every so many years, or infrared scanning of your breaker panels and your transformers and things like that. So we do that. We can help. We can do the testing. We can recommend the recommended plans and intervals, and then we do safety training as well. So if you want us to come into your company and do a talk on arc flash training or electrical safety and those kinds of things, we do that as well. So
Arc flash. You said, I mean, I know what the term means, but exactly what is it you're talking about there?
Yeah, so with arc flash, there's a calculation, and we run computer models based on the types of gear, the conductor sizes, how much voltage and current is available at the utility source, and every type of device down in. Calculate basically the explosion that can occur at any given breaker panel or disconnect or that kind of thing. Quantify that explosive force that literally can kill people, and then we apply labels that show different approach distances, how close you can get when the gear's energized, what type of PPE to wear, and that kind of stuff. So
Fascinating.
Marshall, what? And forgive my naivety with this. With C3 now, where's your client base? Is it because of the growing semiconductor things in the valley, or is it all across all disciplines?
Yeah, it's across all disciplines,
Okay.
and I think it's more of a recognition now with arc flash. It's kind of in a gray area of regulatory realm. So as it gets more and more enforced, and OSHA is more and more enforced, and those kinds of things, as there's more education, there's more call for arc flash studies. So it's becoming more and more prevalent. So it's facilities, it's manufacturing plants, it's even commercial buildings like this should have an arc flash study done. So
Okay.
Things you just never think about. One of them that you said was fascinating, and then I'll
No.
hand it off to you.
No,
I
go.
had it wrote it down. I won't forget it. Infrared scanning.
yeah.
So what are you looking for when you scan a breaker box or breaker panel with infrared scanning?
Yeah, so we do infrared thermography when the equipment's energized, and it's a great tool. Actually, a lot of insurance companies offer a discount or a different rate if you have a regular IR program. We look at equipment under load and basically the connections, the wire connections at the wire lugs. We look at breakers and those kinds of things, and we're looking for a temperature differential. So we have a camera essentially that reads temperature. We look for that differential, and we can see unbalanced loads on,
Sure.
if you have 2 or 3 conductors on a breaker, we can see some breakers that are balanced or unbalanced. We can see loose connections. We can see failing components and that kind of thing, and we can correct those, obviously, before they become a bigger problem. So.
Amazing.
My mind's going 800 miles an hour because now I want to ask you all this stuff in the past.
Oh, no, it's like I'm geeking out. He's
Well-
started into all this.
well,
and it's
see,
like,
So the way I look at it is Marshall's here right now in life, but this all was a culmination of all that facilities management stuff.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong. You're part of IFMA, correct?
Yeah, I'm the current chapter president on my second. You have a 2-year term in our organization. I'm on my second year. The International Facilities Management Association.
Thank you, because that was the next thing I was going to for death by acronym. you know?
Yeah, exactly. And the Phoenix chapter happens to be one of the largest and most active chapters in the world, actually. So yeah, we're a very successful chapter. We have around 330 members right now in the greater Phoenix area. It's roughly a 50-50 split of professional facilities managers and vendors that service the facilities management industry. We try to do something for everything, so we can offer credentialing, education. We do social events. We do community outreach. So we do street cleanups and fundraisers for different things. So yeah, it's a great organization.
You must know. I'm trying to bridge things from in my personal past. You must know Dean Kashawagi and
Yeah,
the
very well.
ASU.
Yeah.
You know the whole
Yeah.
PIPS and
Yeah.
Best Value program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got introduced. Well, guys, probably 15 plus years ago, because I was up in Minnesota. University of Minnesota was one of the very active members with ASU at the time. So,
There we go.
But I remember that when I was coming down here, when I still lived up there, the IFMA part was a big catalyst of what they were trying to do with PIPS and Best Value.
Yeah, and IFMA was a great source. Obviously, it's an international organization, so it was a great source of data for Dr. Dean when he was doing his research as well and quantifying his procurement methodology.
For the audience sake, for those that aren't involved with that, can you just peel that back and just kind of give it your explanation of how that was done in the facilities management arena, like what that meant to you guys when you first started doing that?
His procurement, yeah. So and I spent a lot of my time in government entities, which are slow to change. So I was never and have pretty strict procurement codes and everything. So I was never able to put Dr. Dean's processes into place. But he had some pretty revolutionary ideas regarding procurement, and was able, through his connections with academia and the facilities management industry, to quantify his ideas with solid research regarding procurement and not being low bid, based on performance and more of a partnership with the vendor, and kind of creating these win-win situations that based on trust and partnership and industry knowledge that created a formula for better procurement than the typical low bid or the typical kind of vendor selection processes.
Basically, it was a way to, I'll rephrase it in the way that I always took it away when we were educating it. We were lucky enough that we could not only adapt it, but utilize it and then deploy it in the construction space. We had always heard about how your world, the IFMA and the facilities management, but it basically was, how can you make things that used to be subjective, objective in the procurement model, so that a John Q taxpayer or Jane Q taxpayer could look at it and go, oh, that was a fair procurement. So you didn't have to take low bid, because we all know that low bid leads to just as much or more change and deviation than what it was originally set out to do.
Yeah, and the whole reason I landed at C3, I wasn't looking for work. A friend of mine is part owner of the company, and we joked throughout the past couple of years, it's a fairly new company, about when are you going to come work for me? When are you going to come work for me? And having spent almost 15 years in the public sector, he hit me on a day where I was particularly
fed up
or had a lower degree of patience than I normally had with kind of the bureaucracy. And I don't say that as a knock on my employer, but I think government systems, in an effort to be good stewards of the taxpayer's dollar, actually create systems that are more cumbersome, and they actually are self-defeating in their mission, and that they're so dogmatic and so kind of hiding behind these rules and risk averse that they create situations that actually aren't good for the taxpayer. A career in that, there's a lot of noble and honorable things with being a public servant, but there is a level of frustration too, particularly as they try to be more and more innovative. You're kind of hampered sometimes by things.
I don't think we see an industry anymore that doesn't take that, how do I say, that area, that gray area between, like you said, being risk averse versus managing risk for those opportunity costs that we all are trying to do as capitalists or entrepreneurs or whatever. I think we're all a little bit blinded by that at times, but yeah, I would second your comments there. Marshall, going back, with all this, when you start getting into the infrared and some of the other technology things to pick up on the facilities management, what have you seen? What other changes have you seen in the last, it doesn't have to be a specific amount of years, but where do you see the facilities management trending as far as utilizing technology to help train? Because I'm going to kind of go a little bit further. On a lot of our previous episodes, we keep talking, the emphasis of what we do at Mac and Bleu is talk about building Arizona. And that I know that's wide ranging. But with the lack of human capital that we have in our industries right now, we are leveraging technology more and more and more. So taking that kind of nugget and then combine it over here, how you led in with what Robert and you were talking about, what have you seen over the last few years of what's coming on and where we're going with the facilities management?
Yeah, well, now it's my turn to geek out, because
Okay.
I love talking about facilities management, and I'm in a little bit of an odd space now as an operations manager, because obviously you do operations as a part of facilities management,
Right.
but now I'm a pure operations manager, and for the first time in 15 years, not a formal facilities manager, but I love talking about facilities management, and as a career in itself is going through this kind of renaissance the last 20, 30 years. Facilities managers or the early facilities managers were really the handiest guy, or the glorified janitor, or the handyman,
exactly.
And I hate to say that, but they didn't command a level of respect. And in the last 30 years, as buildings become more complex, now facilities managers are managing or responsible for some of the most expensive parts of a company.
Right.
If you think, utilities and a building and people are the three most expensive assets in a company, facilities managers have direct responsibility for two of those and have an effect on the third one. So
are you seeing more and more candidates with like mechanical, electrical engineering backgrounds, things like that?
Yeah, we're seeing more candidates, and I think the big transformation in the industry is advocating and making facilities managers kind of, I hate it, it's a cliche, but communicate with the C-suite their value, and get the funding that they need, and those kinds of things, because they really are impactful. And now everything with the Internet of Things, or IoT, and all the technology and it's growing so fast, and those kinds of things, really making their value known in the built environment. And that's all things. That's outside, that's inside, that's all those things. And the biggest change came with COVID, I think. Now we have hybrid work environments, and just kind of as the facilities managers are coming of their own and finally getting some traction, their whole role is going to change, because with hybrid work environments now, it's more of a collaboration with IT and HR and all these kinds of things, because now it's not just your ergonomic workspace or your temperature in your environment, it's your work environment at home, and it's scheduling, and it's those kinds of things where we have hot desks now, we have flexible workspaces, we have collaboration spaces, and employees are in and out of the work environment. And the industry is undergoing a lot of stuff, because there's just now starting to be some data accumulated. We went through this thing where very few companies let their employees work from home.
Right.
Everybody had to work from home. And we kind of went through this thing where, well, now we don't need office buildings. They're expensive. They're expensive to build. They're expensive to maintain. Hey, we've proved that people can work from home and still be productive. But now we're seeing, but they're missing that sense of community and company culture and those kinds of things. So now the pendulum's swinging a bit the other way and trying to
Bringing
land
some of them back.
Yeah. So it's very fascinating. And I think personally the COVID and the changing work environment for facilities management, at least, is probably the biggest change since the invention of electricity, honestly, because, again, it's turned the whole industry upside down.
What are tasks that people working from home that a facility manager, I think I know some of these, but how does that, what do you do with somebody that's working from home?
Yeah, well, I think companies are still figuring that out, right? So, when COVID first happened, we started sending people home. One of the first things I was asked was, hey, can your maintenance team deliver monitors to people? Well, we're not staffed to do that. We don't have the bandwidth to do that. Yeah. So who does that? And I think there's a lot of things that, to my knowledge, haven't been litigated yet.
Sure.
It's pretty clear if I have you in an office and I'm responsible for your temperature and your air quality and your ergonomic workspace, what about when you're working from home? If you fall off your chair at home or get carpal tunnel syndrome in your wrist at home, whose responsibility is that?
Yeah, where's that work comp claim?
Right, exactly. If you get up from your workstation and go out and have a cigarette or whatever on your patio or do whatever, and you're playing with the dog and you trip, is that, I think a lot of this stuff is yet to be litigated. So I think there's a lot of gray areas and funky kind of situations that are yet to come until we kind of settle into what's new.
Go back, Marshall, one that hits on me because I always geek out about financing.
Yeah.
Because in my role as a GC, I find that a lot of times talking about the tangible part of the asset is the easy part. Sitting down with owners and architects and engineers and their capital stack and looking at a true pro forma or, a building life cycle cost analysis and things like that. Are you saying, did I hear you say that, when you first got into facilities management, it was all about more of the bricks and the mortar, and now you're looking at a lot more of the economics. What can you speak to about that?
Torrey Contracting, your full-service Division 9 contractor. Torrey Contracting operates with a smaller, hands-on team. This cohesive structure results in superior workmanship and economical solutions. We deliver projects with unsurpassed commitment to quality and stewardship of budget. Torrey Contracting, small enough to listen, big enough to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's you're right. It was bricks and mortar and keeping the air conditioners running and the hot water running and those kinds of things. But now it's work environment. There's all kinds of data about what your productivity is and related to your health and your happiness at work. The one that I really kind of am excited about lately is I was at an IFMA convention last year, heard a speaker. He's from the Harvard School of Public Health, and he and another colleague from the School of Public Health did an incredible amount of research on indoor air quality and made the statement that, we're an indoor species now. We spend 90% of our time indoors. So by the time you're 80 years old, you've spent 72 years inside.
That's a fascinating statistic when you think about it.
Yeah.
Kind of scary.
Yeah.
Well, and he made the statement that your building manager probably has a more direct effect on your health than your physician does.
Yeah.
And we used to use minimum standards as an example for indoor air quality, and those are minimum standards. Well, nobody uses minimum standards for water quality or other things, so why would we do that for air quality? So there's all kinds of things now that tie into, again, indoor air quality, your work environment, things as simple as plants in your environment and light harvesting and all those kinds of things. They do some crazy stuff with just lost the term, but your biorhythms and that kind of stuff is how they're associated with your work hours and the ambient light and all that kind of stuff. And all those now, they have data that correlates all that stuff to happiness and productivity and health and all those kind of things. So there's a lot more to it than just now keeping the air conditioner running.
I'm just curious, Marshall, again, not to get all geeked out, but maybe some of the audience, have you, in any of this IFMA stuff, have they talked about the digital twins? About how that can, like, if you have a digital twin, and let's say the three of us are in an office, we have digital twins, they can go model us all day long in computer simulation and come back and say, hey, based on what they know about the three of us, this is exactly how it's going to play out over the next few years. And if we can design buildings and monitor and change buildings to do the digital twin, then in essence, we're doing preventative maintenance on the person in conjunction with that asset as well. You know where I'm going with this, Marshall?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you tie, physiology in with technology, building technology, it gets really fascinating. So it's the data that they tie to, the amount of sick days you take and that kind of thing based on your indoor air quality and whether you have Zamfir piped in over the intercom and all that kind of stuff. Really,
or the hookah for
right.
Oh man.
Or
you're in the pan flute.
It's crazy. It's very fascinating to me.
So the part I don't understand, Marshall, is collecting the data.
Yeah.
So what is the industry doing to collect all this data? How is the monitoring done? Is it, there are just monitors everywhere now. Is it the NSA looking out?
Yeah, it's Orwellian. Yeah, they depending on your industry or your employer, there's monitors in everything, right? So one of the things IoT does, or the Internet of Things, and I give credit to the facilities management industry really for spawning that. because IoT really is where we've had all these platforms. We have a lighting control system, we have a security system, and we have a heating and cooling system. All these computer platforms, we start tying those together, and that's where we're at a point now where your refrigerator can monitor its own filter and order it from Amazon by itself, when it gets to a certain point. So, occupancy, we can do things now through lighting controls and occupancy sensors. We have, obviously through any building now, there's temperature monitors, humidity monitors, CO2 sensors, all that kind of stuff. So we can be monitored as much and little as you like. So it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Okay. I've been waiting.
What?
No, it's been fantastic, but we've got to talk about the outdoor thing.
Well, that's a whole hour in itself. So
yeah,
let's jump in.
I don't know how we're going to do this, but you are a freelance outdoor writer.
Well, Dr. Marshall.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you just write outside, or is that specific to outdoor activities?
Yeah, specific to hunting and fishing and camping mostly. So my grandfather, I grew up in Canada, as I said before. My grandfather was a fairly well-known writer, newspaper editor in Canada, and a photographer. And I don't know if that's hereditary or not, but when I was in high school, there was a new regional outdoor magazine started, and I had written a letter to the editor and said, hey, what about a column based on a teen's view of hunting and fishing and that kind of thing? And lo and behold, the editor and assistant editor showed up at my high school, and I got called to the office. They took me out to lunch and offered me my own column.
You took your shot. Good for you.
Yeah, I took my shot.
How old were you?
17, 16.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
It is awesome.
Yeah, so I've been doing that ever since. So I edit. I do a little bit of outdoor marketing. I have a hunting and fishing website. So yeah, it's fun.
Good.
Desert Rat Outdoors?
That's it. Desert Rat Outdoors. Yeah.
.com?
.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Easy enough.
There's a good plug and a spiff for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Oh, you're going to get blown up.
Oh,
I mean, you're probably
yeah.
going to have to get a bigger server.
So with that,
what
have been, because I know how that kind of works. I've got family and extended family in the business too. What are the travel perks and benefits, and what's some of the cool things you've been able to do?
So I'm pretty low scale. I've interviewed some cool people. I've interviewed Ted Nugent and Brenda Valentine and some other industry kind of celebrities, but mostly I've tried to stay revenue neutral over the years. So my gig and early on, when I first moved to Arizona, I was an assistant editor of the Arizona Outdoors magazine, and I saw that print was starting to go away and online, so I went to a blog format. And my thing is companies send me stuff to review, and I get to keep what I review, and I stay relatively revenue neutral, so I don't have to worry about the tax man and get some cool stuff. I only review things I'm interested in keeping. So packs, sleeping bags,
Nice
boots, whatever it is.
So the outdoors in Canada differs greatly to the outdoors in Arizona.
It does.
So 25 years, 26 years you've been here. So we moved here, my wife and I moved here 30-something years ago from Central Texas. Same thing, water, trees.
Right.
Beautiful, what we think. And the first time I go to a lake out here to go fishing, it's like desert and cactus up to the edge of the water.
Yeah.
There are no trees. So how do you make that leap? That's got to be something. I mean, you shoot if it's a rifle, a pistol, those things doesn't matter, north, south. But the game differences, the technique differences to get. How did that change come about?
Yeah, well, it's funny because when people think desert, they think Sahara, right? And the Sonoran Desert is beautiful. I love it. And people are astounded how green and alive it is, I moved here. I was living in northern Maine when I moved here, and obviously hunted and fished and everything back there, and was worried about losing my hunting and fishing when I came here, and come to find out there's more to hunt and fish here than there is back there. It's different. You need to find it and figure it out.
Right.
You align yourself with other people who are do it. You get in, you join clubs and groups and that kind of thing. I always advocate when people move here, they call them critter clubs here, but there's deer associations, and there's the Elk Society, and there's the National Turkey, and there's the Bighorn Sheep, and those are all folks that not only are proficient at hunting or fishing, but they give back, they do projects and whatnot, and it's a good way to kind of learn and give back too. So the draws are different out here because almost everything's a draw now because the game doesn't have the same density as it does north. So they're more regulated, but there's actually more species probably to hunt and fish here than there is in the north.
Robert, from my take, I have to answer that as an avid hunter as well and fisherman. When we moved here from the upper Midwest, I was fortunate. I mean, my family, we had prime bow hunting, deer hunting land in Buffalo County, Wisconsin, which is like, one of the top counties in the country for trophy whitetail deer. And I will give up I gave that up, and I continue to tell everyone I would gladly give that up, having 450 acres in Buffalo County, to have a couple million acres in Arizona. And it's funny because before we got on here, I told you that this next weekend I'm going to be scouting for my son because he's got a tag in southern Arizona for Coues deer. And I would much rather do that now than sit in a deer stand back in the upper Midwest.
Really?
Oh, yeah, because I'm engaged with my son. I don't have to sit in a tree, bored out of my gourd. And to Marshall's thing, it's a more interactive way of being a conservationist and a hunter and fisherman. And to Marshall's credit, the one thing that is universal across the country is those organizations do give back. So like I was very active in certain organizations up there, much more in the waterfowling space. Right. But now with NWTF, with the National Wild Turkey, I know some of my nearest friends here were met through that organization. We give back with giving to the kids, take other kids out. Yeah. A classic example is take a kid that doesn't have a father, hunting and fishing to expose them to the outdoors. It opens up their world to a number of things. I'm sure, Marshall, you can go on.
Yeah, and there's Ducks Unlimited is very active here. Sure. And people don't think there's duck hunting in the desert, but
there's tons.
Yeah, it's amazing. So and I love the southern units. This is the first year in 4 years. I usually hunt 36C.
Oh, sure.
Down by Sasabe and hunt Coues deer. So it's beautiful down there. I love the country, and it's just it's different. They call it glassing here. So instead of sitting in a stand, you're behind binoculars all day. And when I first moved here, you kind of I'm used to walking everywhere, so I walked and hardly saw anything. And people kept saying, buy binoculars, get a tripod, get to the highest point around, and glass. And once I got that through my head,
and I think it goes hand in hand. So let's be honest, a lot of what we do in building Arizona, all the things that we're talking about, and think about everyone we've had here, there's just a lot of outdoors people that are related to not only construction, but everything that we've had on. Yeah, so I think it's a wonderful tie-in for what Marshall's talking about.
I am by no means an avid outdoorsman. But the one thing that I've never been able to get my mind around, and my son-in-laws, my son, my grandsons, they all hunt. Coming from Central Texas, it was a similar piece like you're talking about. We owned land.
It's part of how you grew up.
We owned land. It was you get up at 4 a.m, you go out and you sit and you freeze to death, sitting in a stand waiting for the sun to come up, okay? And out here, you're out with I don't know how many ever other hunters just wandering around, and the safety always just I'm petrified for my kids all the time because I never hunted that way.
Right.
And that's the only way they've hunted. And they're like, Dad, it's not a big deal. If you're safe, you watch. This last time out, my son, they'd taken the kids had drawn for deer, I think, some deer, elk, no, just deer. They finally found one. My son, and it was actually not his son, but one of my other grandsons, are getting close, okay, so they can get a better shot. Somebody shoots over their head and takes the deer. And I'm like, there's my point. That's what I'm talking about. But I mean, there was a few words. I'm sure you understand how that went down, but there was no loss of life other than the deer. But there were some words. So how do you get around that safely? I mean, I know people are wearing colors and orange and doing stuff, but
it's training. There's a lot of people that don't go through it, but predominantly most people go through the hunting safety program.
Oh, every one of my grandkids did. It had to.
Now, and Marshall brings up a good point, though. So in Arizona, it's draw only,
Right.
Whereas a lot of other states have over the counter, and it's you get the density is the issue. The lower the density, the fewer the
draws.
Well, and the fewer the risk for safety violations.
Sure.
So, they get lots of feedback on that. Game and Fish does, and a lot of that density is driven on not only the herd but also on the safety measures. Are you ever going to engineer out stupidity of society?
No, it's never going to happen.
Okay, but Marshall, go ahead.
Well, I think culturally too that a lot of us grew up in hunting families and learned how to hunt and had a dad or uncle or grandfather or whatever that would whack you in the head if you were swinging your gun around and not being safe and those kind of things. And I think as families get away from that, and one thing I've noticed in Arizona, and I think the internet's a double-edged sword, and I really one thing that really kind of sticks in my craw is you get these hunting groups on Facebook and everything, and a new person will ask for help, and everybody jumps on them, and people are nasty, and there's culturally hunting numbers are going down, but when people do try to do it, they don't make it easy for people to learn and take them under their wing and that kind of stuff. So I think there's some of that goes on, and again, it's education and culturally, it's not as pervasive as it used to be. There's not as many hunters as there used to be, so we're losing some of that kind of knowledge that gets passed down, I think.
So speaking of that, I mean, and I hate to put you on the spot, Marshall, but have you been mentoring anyone in the outdoor writing at all or anything like that?
When people ask, if people ask me, obviously, but I don't have anybody currently, but I always offer, particularly nonprofits, if people need help writing or editing or anything, I never charge for that. But yeah, whenever I've had people come to me and say, hey, I'm not a good writer, could you help me? I'm always happy to give them hints or tips or whatever.
So you mentioned that you do a lot of reviews, or you do reviews things. Are you that guy that gives an honest review regardless of the fact that you're getting it for free?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I owe it to my readers that it's an honest review. And if I haven't had too many bad ones over the years. I've had a couple. Sometimes
what was the response from them?
They were disappointed. A couple I'll contact, say, hey, your review's not going to go well, and maybe it was a bad.
We'll make a better product or
yeah,
better service.
Right. But I also try to put the positive things too. So,
okay.
I went on a fishing trip in Texas and great guides, great fishing, best fishing I've probably had. They have an agreement with another company that provides the cabins, and the cabins were fine, but there was no amenities in them. Which you go there and you have to bring your own foodware, but there's like no cookware. There's no part of my review was, hey, if they just added a couple extra things, it would have been awesome. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I always try to be honest. I try to show the positives and the negatives. If it's just junk, then that's what the review is going to be. So
you get what you send.
Yeah.
Awesome. So DesertRatOutdoors.com for the outdoor stuff. Now, one of the things that I've noticed, which is kind of a theme, I want to jump on this for a few minutes since we've got a little bit, is because I wanted to see how this ties in with the facilities maintenance piece, which is tends to be a theme in everything we're doing, is the lack of manpower. Right. The people that are coming up, that are growing up, and you mentioned it in the outdoor stuff, the hunters, the older folks are man, oh, this is horrible, especially for an older folk, but us older folks are dying off or just not able to get out and do it anymore. And the younger folks aren't as interested for whatever reason. We see that in construction, hugely right now. Is that a problem in the facilities maintenance world as well?
There comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Blue Wave, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Blue Wave to get it done right the first time.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, IFMA, the IFMA Foundation, which is the fundraising arm of IFMA, just like a lot of organizations have foundations, and they're focused mostly on scholarships for students. But they identified, that to your point, around, I think it's 65-70% of professional facilities managers are going to retire out in the next 10 years. So there's a big gap. They call it the FM pipeline, and there's a big gap there. And to their credit, they've created basically a turnkey solution, because let's face it, the facilities management profession has evolved the last 20 or 30 years, but we haven't had high school guidance counselors saying, hey, you should be a facilities manager, because nobody really knew what it was. So the foundation created basically a turnkey solution where we have accredited programs that can start in high school. They can be in trade schools. They can be in community colleges. We have undergrad programs. We have grad programs. They have an ambassador training kit that allows our chapter members to go out and talk to folks, whether it's a school, whether it's a teacher's organization or whatever, really focused on trying to recruit people into the profession. It's a great profession for veterans. It's a great profession for adult learning and those kind of things. So we've been trying to do that. It's called the Global Workforce Initiative. We've had some struggles in Arizona. I tell people that we can see in the house, but we can't find the door. So I'll elaborate a little bit. So in other states where this program's been successful, the problem's been for us here in Arizona is that it's been different. A different path in every state. So California's had some great success with this. It was through their community college system. Denver's had some good success with this, but it was through their economic development department of the city of Denver. New York has had some success with this, but it was through through a nonprofit that focused on adult education. So every organization's had every region's had a different path to success. We've had a lot of interest. I've spent a lot of time talking to universities and community colleges and high schools and teachers groups. I got some really good, the mayor of Gilbert at the time had an adult education group that had everything from charter schools up through the universities. They were very excited about it, but what we found is kind of a chicken and egg where if we find an educational institution to run it, there's no funding. If we find a group with funding, we don't have
no place to do it.
Yeah, so we're looking for the door. Everyone's interested,
Yeah.
And I think there's a domino effect. Obviously, a high school or a community college would, we have what they call an FM Essential Certificate, which is a globally recognized certificate. Well, you could add that if somebody's in community college doing a business program or even a trades program, a welding program or an air conditioning, you could add that, and then they'd have a good kind of lead into facilities management. Those students can then go into undergrad programs. The undergrad, ASU used to have a reasonably active grad program, and then it kind of dwindled a little bit. It was a grad program, then it turned into a focus under construction management, and now it's kind of waned away. But again, the educational institutions are interested, but there's no funding. And when we've had funding sources, you had to have an educational institution already lined up. So it's been this kind of weird dynamic. But the foundation does have a program, and we're focusing this year and next year, and really getting our ambassadors trained up and getting folks out there to talk about FM as a profession. So
Yeah, I would think that the fact that things are more technical, you know, the IoT, as you've mentioned several times, is going to draw some of the youth in, obviously, because it does get away from the guy wearing the bag of the tools around and showing up with a plunger in their hand, mentality of things. So, very
I was just
interesting.
thinking, we just had Cindy Gutierrez on from CTE. And maybe that's even where we got your name, Marshall. I can't remember.
Karole.
That's right. But it was still another
Yeah.
6 degrees,
Yeah.
a bunch of connecting the dots. As you were talking, I was just thinking, it's that same old adage where you just got to get in, give these kids exposure, that there's more than one thing. I think we just always look at the first layer and don't realize there's 2 to 3 layers deep on everything. And this is another classic example of, hey, you love this, working with your hands, working with your brain, you know what I mean, that interaction. But now you don't necessarily have to be a trades man or woman. There's these other things like facilities maintenance and management. And who knows, it's probably a whole nother thing. It's curious. I wanted to go down when we were looking at your bio, Marshall, the emergency management.
Sure.
How does that whole thing dovetailed into what your background has been in relation to whether it's facilities management, construction, whatever? I think that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah. So my spot when I was working at the biomedical campus downtown, as most people know, all 3 universities are on that campus.
Right.
University of Arizona was kind of like the anchor store with a medical school there, so they provided services to all 3 universities. So, it was a great position in that, being a satellite campus, my colleagues at the U of A, and it was such an unusual dynamic in Phoenix because, the U of A in Tucson isn't used to having 3 entities to deal with, three universities and a city and a state. And most people don't know that, that biomedical campus was a kind of a brainchild of the county and the city and the state and the 3 universities to build this biomedical hub downtown and revitalize downtown.
So who did you technically answer to?
I worked for the U of A.
Okay.
But I reported to the dean of the medical school, but I provided services, our group. So because there was kind of this, we didn't have the critical mass to have a full-blown emergency manager, and we didn't have a UAPD down there, and we didn't have fleet services. My shop kind of did it all. So at some point, I was the executive director, we called it, of campus management and operations. So I got to oversee campus security. I got to oversee emergency planning. I got to oversee fleet services, in addition to the facilities management. So one of the great perks of being a university employee is you get a killer tuition reduction. You can go to any of the 3 universities for a very low amount. So I decided to get a degree at NAU in public agency management. Because I was doing emergency management or emergency planning downtown, I had a conversation with somebody at an emergency management group, and they said, well, if you add 3 or 4 classes, you can do a double major and get 2 degrees. And I'm like, yeah, so that sounded like a good plan. Emergency management kind of came natural to me. It was a role I could fill on the campus down there. It had some nuances with 3 universities, so you couldn't just kind of cookie cut the U of A's plan, because you get into notifications and policies and all those kinds of things. You have the city of Phoenix as a first responder, and I think a lot of my military background kind of brought that emergency management stuff in too. And my role in the military kind of looked at anticipating problems and danger and attacks on it. And being a Boy Scout, the same thing, be prepared. I just really connected with emergency management. So to learn more at the time, as part of my responsibility, I joined the Arizona Emergency Services Association, which is professional facilities managers. I joined the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, kind of as part of my campus security functions down there. So I just as a facilities manager, I got a very broad range of experience that I may not have gotten in other places, and I really enjoyed it. And I like the emergency management stuff. When I'm called on to or asked to do presentations sometimes, one of my favorite ones is business continuity. So I like doing business continuity, training with people, and it's just I have a real connection with it. I like anticipating problems and offering mitigation and solutions to those. So.
People told us you'd be a great guest.
Yeah.
They weren't joking.
I wasn't joking about the Dr. Marshall Macfarlane.
Oh man, I'm telling you what. I'm telling you, no, it's great stuff today.
I think it just really opens everyone's eyes to facilities maintenance management is not what it used to be.
No, not at all.
Just like everything is not what it used to be. You know, when you kind of cemented this last deal, that thinking about that campus, which I've been by there tons of times, to think that you've got emergency services, fleet, and security all molded into that. I bet 98% of the populace would have never fathomed that. They would be like, "Oh, that's 10 departments." No, you don't have that with funding now. You just can't.
No, and that was the problem. Is often there wasn't enough call or need or population on that campus to justify an emergency manager or to justify, a police presence. At downtown, we were just basically another corporate citizen to the Phoenix Police Department, and they were very gracious and great to work with. We had a liaison officer, but the problem with a satellite campus, and I think the U of A figured this out, was not all of your solutions from main campus work at the satellite campus,
sure.
and you have to kind of create some solutions that are unique to that situation. So
incredible.
What I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Back to, or just thinking strictly kind of more granular on the facilities management. I'm thinking as the contractor, we have such a problem with supply chain. Are you guys, in the IFMA world? How are you able to do that, circumvent those issues as well? Looking at, hey, how do we have an extra RTU in backup, or how do we have, all these different parts? So has that been a huge challenge? And what has your industry done differently than the construction industry?
Yeah, we've seen not just supply chain issues, but as you know, with supply chain issues come budget crises because everything doubled and tripled in price.
Yeah.
And it's funny, my boss in Gilbert called me contingency man because all my budgets were pretty much shot post-COVID.
Welcome to everyone's world.
Yeah. So I think the budgets were probably a bigger issue than some of the supply chains. We saw it. Luckily, in Gilbert, I was a major part of their design and construction teams. We had a number of capital projects going on where we saw significant supply chain issues. With facilities management, a lot of it was during COVID. There was supply chain issues with sanitizers and cleaning stuff, and that now we're seeing supply chain issues again on, you mentioned RTUs, boilers and chillers and things like that. Some of them are 54, 60-week lead times or more. And it's
switchgear, anything electricals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm working on a job with C3 where we're trying to find pans for breaker panels and stuff, and you can't find anything. So, yeah, it's it takes some extra planning and some extra contingency ideas, and you have to get creative. And one thing that, again, I said I was an introvert before, but one of the things I've learned as I've matured through my career is the value of relationships. And I was kind of the guy that was fine not having any friends or not liking people, but I've really learned the value of those relationships, and even if it's my personality to sit in the corner with my arms folded, that doesn't do my organization or my employees any good. So I've learned to come out of my shell and that kind of thing, but the value of relationships, navigating some of these supply chain issues, I'll call somebody that I haven't talked to in 5 years and said, hey, I need this breaker, I need this whatever, and they help you out if they can. So sure. I think the value of relationships has really come to the forefront on some of these supply chain issues and everything. Now, can they always help? No.
Yeah, but couldn't agree more.
But certainly it's better than kind of going it alone.
Well, at least you answered the question. I was hoping you had a silver bullet, but none of us do.
There's no silver bullet.
Marshall, what as we wrap up here, what haven't we asked you today that you'd love to share with the audience, knowing that what this podcast means to building Arizona?
Yeah, I think understand people and their talents and their resources. I for a long time it just due to my upbringing and whatnot, I was reticent to say I was good at something. It just I was kind of born out of humility, and it was beaten into my head to be a quiet professional, and it was uncomfortable for me to say I'm good at something. And I think it's okay to say you're good at this, and kind of that servant leadership. You're obligated, if you have talents, to kind of offer those out there to help people. So, one of the things I like to do is I do leadership presentations. I call it meat and potatoes leadership, and I basically take the armies and the U.S. and the Canadian are very similar principles of leadership. And one of my pet peeves is, there's no more challenging thing to do than supervise other human beings, because every person's different. And they have personal stuff, they have technical things, and we'll throw.
We don't have personal stuff,
right.
Especially this guy.
But we'll throw we'll throw people into situations where they have to be leaders or supervisors with not a lick of training, not even, hey, we'll take an hour and here's the principles of leadership. We'll get a new phone system at the office, and everyone has to go to mandatory training, or we have mandatory training for everything, but we'll put a human being in charge of another human being with no training at all, other than they happen to be there the longest, and expect that to be successful, right?
Happens every day,
and expect them to be successful, and so I like doing that. I like talking about business continuity, and I'm kind of a preventive maintenance geek, so I like I'm not comfortable public speaking, but I enjoy teaching, if that makes sense. So
it does.
So I always do that, and I just think do better for people, and be kind, and help where you can, and be a good leader if that's your thing. If technical stuff's your thing, if being an extrovert's your thing, just for people to give back.
Yeah, own it.
Yeah.
Well, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, to give the two. If you would, give both, the C3 and the outdoor stuff.
Absolutely.
So, I have a long name, so it's M. Macfarlane at canfieldeng.com for the C3, or they can Google C3 Engineering and find us there. We're based in Chandler. We do work all over the world, wherever you call us, but we're based in Chandler. And go to Desert Rat Outdoors for the other one, and there's a contact me form there, and they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn.
Very easy
and all
to
those
find on
kind of
LinkedIn.
deals, so.
Yeah, we stalked him and tracked him down.
We did. I absolutely did.
At my age, I'll take all the stalkers I can get. So
Yeah, it's kind of fun when you get our age,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Exactly. Awesome.
Hey, it was these two geeky guys spying on me, right?
Right.
Right.
I'll
some
take
podcast.
it. I'll take it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, man, thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks, Marshall. This was great.
Fantastic time. We'll have to do it again
Yeah.
sometime.
I'd love it.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you,
We'll see
guys.
next
Appreciate
week.
it.
Yep.
Take us out of here.
You've been listening to the Mac and Blue Show, brought to you by Tory Contracting and Blue Wave General Contracting. Be sure to subscribe to the Mac and Blue podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Follow Robert Johnson and JJ Levensky on LinkedIn and Instagram. Tune in live every first and third Thursday at 3 p.m. as we continue to introduce you to the people building Arizona. Walt Disney said, "You can dream, create, design, and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it requires people to make the dream a reality." Until next time, make it a great day.